2017 was an exceptionally strong year for game releases. We got some of the best modern entries in iconic series, games that breathed fresh life into franchises once thought past their peak, sequels to decently received games that now eclipse their predecessors, and of course a bunch of creative indie hits, along with a bunch of disappointments and controversies, but that's the nature of big business. Though I toyed with the idea of doing a conventional favorite games of the year, I'd probably find it hard to say things about most of my picks that the slew of existing lists out there haven't already. Not to mention that there are also some big ones like Horizon that sound great but I haven't sunk that much time into, or stuff that sounds up my alley but I have yet to touch at all like Persona 5, so I'd feel like I was leaving some deserving games out. So instead I decided to venture into less trodden territory, and in no particular order, give you some recommendations based on games that I found excellent, but they didn't quite light up the industry the way most hyped AAA and occasional indies do. Sure, some are from established publishers and series, and all of them got generally good to great reviews, but they can still be considered somewhat niche in the grand scheme, while others are straight up indie efforts with clear passion put into them by their small teams. And for the record, if I hadn't already reviewed the Metronomicon and A Hat in Time, you can bet they would have been spotlighted here as well. But let's get right to it. The Danganronpa games, being a mix of visual novels and point-and-click adventures at their core, except this one I'm fine with forgetting it honestly, have to rely on the strength of their writing more than most games. And I'm hard-pressed to think of series that have been more successful at getting me engrossed in their murder mysteries, the friendships and clashes between their over-the-top cast of imprisoned teens, and toying with my expectations from game to game. V3 is thankfully no exception to this. While I will definitely fault it for feeling more padded out during its first half, and maybe being the most guilty when it came to me guessing murder methods long before I was probably supposed to, in nearly every other way it delivers the experience I want and expect from main games in the series. The overall cast may have some of the craziest character concepts and personalities the series has ever seen, from this punk inventor with a vocabulary that would make Deadpool blush, to a cosplayer who breaks out in hives as she dresses as real-life people, to a student who happens to be an insecure robot, to this guy.
Danganronpa is really weird.
The recurring villain, the sadistic remote-controlled bear Monokuma, is still one of my favorite baddies in gaming, and his new crew of cub sidekicks help add to his twisted sense of humor wonderfully. But maybe the best thing about this game, and one of the series' biggest strengths overall to me, is just how well it is at pulling the rug out from the player on a frequent basis, just being one step ahead of you. Character allegiances, secrets, and actions are more often than not super hard to guess, as well as figuring out the mysteries behind the circumstances of the deadly killing game the cast is trapped in, and how it's affecting the rest of the world. Hell, I had to be careful choosing which clips to include for the sake of spoilers, as the first chapter alone throws a twist so crazy and far-reaching in its impact that I was left reeling from it for a whole day, and it would be very easy to spoil if I'm not careful. Finally, much like the last game, how exactly killing Harmony connects to the previous installments is primarily saved for its doozy of a finale. The decisions the writers make with how to wrap this story up and what themes and concepts to add have already divided plenty of fans, but I'd say I'm firmly in the thumbs up crowd. Right after the game reaches a ballsy as hell reveal in the second to last chapter, along comes the end to throw everything off balance. If Danganronpa's 2 finale went for in-your-face conceptual and visual trippiness, V3's Ultimate Truths mess with your head in a completely different manner that I dare not spoil. It's honestly weird to think that the original's final reveals feel so conventional and passé by this point. This series has seen a steady climb in popularity stateside with each release. God knows I see swarms of cosplayers and fan art at every convention nowadays, but it still doesn't feel on the same level of being iconic as similar series like Persona or Ace Attorney, hence my decision to add it to this list. Having completed every game in the series now, I'd still recommend playing the Danganronpa trilogy in its original release order. Whichever one ends up your favorite, it will be a hard call. I'm still not sure whether or not I prefer this over the first game myself, but kudos to the devs at Spike Chunsoft for continuously being able to take me on a ride like few other series have. Indie RPGs utilizing retro pixel graphics have become a dime a dozen nowadays. I mean, there's a dedicated tag for RPG Maker on Steam, it's so oversaturated. If you take a common aesthetic approach, you'd better give it your all. And thankfully, that's what developer Z-Boyd Games did with their first crowdfunded title, Cosmic Star Heroine. This game oozes style, with a mix of cyberpunk backgrounds and characters mixing elements of both pixel and hand-painted art, numerous animated cutscenes, and a legit fantastic soundtrack by Hyperduck. The plot, involving a government agent who ends up jumping ship to resistance after making some sinister discoveries, is also packed with a lot of solid humor despite the darker framing device, but not in a way that feels at odds or lazy. And the battle system is super creative and satisfying, with a lot of creative elements that add up to a very unique whole. And honestly, that's all I have to say about it in this video. Unlike the others, I haven't completed it, so just consider this portion a slim slice of ham and a ham sandwich of gaming goodness. That joke went nowhere. Back in 2015, when Telltale confirmed plans to produce a game based on a Marvel license, my guess for the most iconic franchise well suited for their post-Walking Dead difficult choice-making template was X-Men. But lo and behold, they ended up going with the series I was personally gunning for. Guardians of the Galaxy has fast become a personal favorite, and its core conceit of a group who have different personal baggage and varied levels of morality facing crazy interstellar threats felt like such a good fit for this developer, and yeah, I'd say they delivered. The overarching plot with a crazy mystical artifact and a troubled villain wanting to use it fits the world of Guardians great, and even ends up tying into their past tragedies. All of the subplots and quirks with the team feel natural as well. Of course Gamora and Nebula's sister issues will factor into things. Of course Drax will misunderstood half the stuff everyone says. Of course Groot will be Groot. And of course, Rocket's going to be an irritable little dick who causes problems as hilariously as only he can.
Rocket's not here right now because Pete's being a jackass. Leave a message at the—
I know you're there, Rocket.
Beep!
The game is also smart enough to not directly tie itself to the movies or existing comics from what I can tell. I mean, it starts with you killing Thanos, they establish it right away. I'd even say certain things are handled better than the movies, like how we actually get to see a good chunk of time with Peter's mom and how awesome she actually was, you know, instead of just her dying in a hospital and being like,
well, I don't know what you're talking about, but I like the way you say it.
And yes, this also means that none of the movie actors reprise their roles, but when the worst thing I can say about the cast here is that they just prove that Dave Bautista's laugh is irreplaceable, then that means that they still get a thumbs up from me. And speaking of laughter, I haven't even brought up how funny this game is. Telltale's modern games often use some pretty bleak properties, but here I was laughing out loud regularly with the turns individual scenes and lines of dialogue would take, even when we get group flashback meant to inspire the heroes they throw a goofy curveball at us.
Do you want the mustache on or off?
Now, as much as I enjoyed this and as high profile a license it carried, the reason I put it on this list is due to Telltale's gameplay formula being increasingly divisive, and the game's Metacritic averages point to that still standing. They've gotten a lot better at giving you entirely different segments in each episode based on key decisions, but if you've been waiting for them to pull a heavy rain and offer wildly different overarching plots, well, keep waiting.
Jason!
The Steam version also generally ran a lot better than stuff like the first Walking Dead and Wolf Among Us, but I wish so many of the action prompts didn't cause that weird speeding up effect when I did them. Telltale's mass appeal doesn't seem to be as high as it was a few years back, especially if the recent news of layoffs and planning to scale back on how many games they pump out is any indication, so there's a good chance many of you passed on this, but I strongly encourage you to check it out at some point, especially if the possible sequel they tease happens. I mean, it's a Marvel game, so of course it has a credit stinger.
Let us enjoy the quiet for a moment longer. Moment over. We should leave now.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, please leave comments, likes, feel free to subscribe for more, share it with friends, and give my podcast Sketch Watch Play a look, where we talk games, cartoons, and much more.